go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our inaugural conversations series that we're doing called Big Ideas in Small Rooms. I realized I probably should have called it Big Ideas in Small Zooms because that's where we are right now. But what I'm going to ask is for everybody to make sure that your microphone and your camera are off, if you could, please. And if you have any questions, leave them in the chat. And then at the end of, as we get closer to the end of the event, we can then look at those questions. Carol, do you mind turning off your camera?
Hi, Carol.
Thank you. So everybody, I want to introduce you to, most of you know him, but Ahmed Bharoocha, and also known as Ahmed Bharoocha, which if you haven't had a chance, your album came out in 2018, I think, and is available, on iTunes.
I don't remember time anymore.
I know.
Not this year.
It was. It wasn't. It was
pre this year. Yeah.
In the past. But it's available on iTunes and is just a treat. Tell us a bit about Ahmed Bharoocha and the sort of derivation of that.
So, I mean, the album title is just from people saying my name wrong all the time. Someone called me Almond Bird Shit once. And Ahmed Bharoocha was another one of my favorites. And that was fun. I recorded it in Madison, Wisconsin, in one of my favorite comedy clubs I've ever been to, Comedy on State. It's just like exactly what you want from a comedy club. There's like a cool bar area before you get to the club. So it just feels like this cool vibe. And then they just really do it right. They kind of train their audiences. They have like, just, they kind of tell them, table talk to a minimum, just little tweaks like that really kind of jazz up the whole room. And that was, one of my favorite places I've ever been.
Right. And how did it feel when the quote unquote album dropped? I'm trying to be with the kids here. But
yeah.
How did that
It was
feel?
cool. That was like kind of something that as a stand-up comedian, one of the big check marks is you want to put out an album, and it was probably about 10 years into doing stand-up. So it kind of felt like, okay, this is it. You want it to be perfect, but you can't wait till everything's right. And it felt like a good time.
Right. Excellent. For those of you who also don't know, Ahmed was a graduate of the theater department in 2008. And you got a degree in film and in theater. Am I correct?
I think just theater. I think barely too. I think I have Paula to thank for a lot of credits. I was an engineer for a while, and then they were just like, "Get out of here." 6 years in, they were like, oh, "It's okay, mercy graduation."
Right. So, so you're from all over. What eventually led you to URI?
So I grew up in California. My mom's from Rhode Island, so we moved to Rhode Island when I was a junior in high school, which was very traumatic, leaving sunny California for Rhode Island. But I love Rhode Island too, and so that's where I was living, and that's one of the only places. Or no, I think I had a couple of places that accepted me into college. I was not the best student, but URI accepted me with open arms. And I went there, started out as an engineer, taking a couple theater classes on the side. And then eventually I realized that I wasn't going to any of the engineering classes. And I had like 100% attendance in the theater classes and just slowly just morphed into theater,
Which is the way it happens, like any bad habit, right?
It's like, wow, I'm never missing a theater class and I'm always missing all my other classes. Maybe I should switch my major.
That's really what theater is. And you were in a number of shows at URI. I remember specifically Pride and Prejudice, which we had a super amount of time on. But you were also in Angels in America, and Stuff Happens, a very piece.
I was Iraqi exile. I think that was my. I didn't even audition. It was.
You were like, Iraqi exile.
Called me. Like, you got it. You got the part.
And what was it about URI that and the experience that you sort of remember the most? It doesn't. I mean, we'd like it to be a good thing.
Yeah, it was good. It's where I started doing stand up. It's where I really, leaned into theater. I always wanted to do it, but I think before in high school, I didn't really realize that I should study it and commit time to it. I thought, yeah, I'll get a job and then I'll figure it out after that. And so it really was where I kind of stumbled into the theater department and just met a lot of people that I really liked. And everyone was really passionate about theater and art. And that really just kind of made me feel home and welcome. And I wasn't even a theater major. I was just hanging out a lot. And then eventually they gave me a degree, which was nice. And I did like some stand up on campus a lot. I worked in the cafeterias. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time there.
Oh, good. And I remember that you won a few stand up like local on campus stand up events, right?
Yeah, I think it was like American Eagle, the clothing brand came and did a contest. I didn't win it, but I think it was probably for the better because the winner got to go perform in Cancun for spring break, which is the worst place to perform stand-up comedy. And I feel like the guy who won, he was pretty new, and I was new, but he was even newer than me. And it was like they fed him to the wolves because it's MTV, everyone's like half naked dancing, and then he comes out, he's a tiny little speck, and he's like, "Hey, what's up with?" And they're like, "Woo, party time!" Like beach balls going. I remember watching it and being like, "Oh, I would not have done well there."
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But you were also working at Stitches, weren't you, while you were in school?
Yeah, that is where I started doing stand-up. Not many people that you knew Stitches.
Yeah.
Very.
For those of you who don't know, Stitches used to be a comedy club at the Providence Place Mall. And
where all comedy clubs should be.
yeah. And I don't think it lasted very long.
No, probably the amount of time I worked there was I ruined it. I destroyed it.
It's your fault. We'll blame you. And then right after that, Nordstrom left. So, you put the pieces together, people. But you were working there while you were a student, and you were a dishwasher too.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was a comedy club. I thought it was called Stitches Comedy Cafe. So I thought, it's like a place where the wait staff is hilarious or something.
Right.
So I applied there, telling them like, I love comedy. I really want to work here. And they're like, will you wash dishes? I'm like, yeah, of course. Yeah. So I just worked there for a year before I got the courage to jump on stage. And that was also about the time I was taking acting classes. And it was kind of where I just realized that's all I wanted to do was theater and comedy and forget engineering. And I didn't care about anything else.
Right.
Yeah, it was a really great time to find out what I wanted to do.
Right. And how did that prepare? I mean, certainly the dishwashing, I don't think probably prepared you so much for comedy.
No, it did.
Dealing with lots of material. But how did that kind of, to use your own phrase, being thrown to the wolves and stepping out on stage and, the comedy mecca that is Providence, how did that have an impact on how you looked at the field and
Yeah, I think what I love about stand-up is there's kind of no barrier. You just go up, you sign, like with open mics at least, you sign up and you're there and you're just doing it. So you're just really kind of diving in, and you can bomb. People might not like it, people might like it, but you're just this constant access to an audience. Like with theater, you have to audition, and I was always scared to audition. And so with stand-up, it was just like, put your name down here and we'll call you up and you can talk for 5 minutes and
right.
And then it's over. But I think before that, I was so afraid of failing. I would watch from the dishwasher or the bus station, and I would see other people bomb, and it really made you realize that failing is okay and it's kind of necessary. So that's really what I think kind of helped me, not deaden your senses, but like thicken your skin to just get out there and just do it.
Well, and do you find that because the art can be a 5-minute moment, that basically once you've bombed, they've moved on to somebody else,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say they've forgotten you, but you have a million opportunities to
Yeah.
reinvent yourself.
And they do forget you, which, I mean, unless it was this like tragic event where you rip down the curtain, but the most of the time your bombing is so internal. You're just like, they hate me, they're not laughing, and really they might not even be paying attention. You know?
Right, and your comedy is I keep using this word family friendly. I don't mean that, but
Oh, yeah.
there's a sort of connectivity, I think, to your comedy that it's not profanity laden. It's
Yeah.
not about tearing other people down. How do you look at kind of your comedy genre, or how you've sort of developed
Yeah.
Ahmed?
Well, I guess early on I kind of decided I didn't really want to swear. I swear a little bit more now than I did in the beginning, but I think maybe my mom and my grandmother just were in my head. I'm like, I don't want them to not, because every time they'd come to a show, that's their biggest complaint was, I don't know why everyone had to be so filthy, you know? And a lot of times I did find that sometimes you'd get a laugh just off of swearing. So it felt cheap to me. And I was trying to find a way, or maybe I would write something and the swear would be in there. But if I didn't need it, I would take it out.
Right.
And so I use swearing sparsely through my set if I think if there's nothing that can replace it. Sometimes you need that punch or something.
Well,
but I don't want it to be beep 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 beep.
Right. When somebody calls you almond bird shit,
Yeah.
That's kind of integral to your story.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't really avoid that.
Yeah.
Now,
and there was motivation too, where like thinking about it as a career, swearing, they don't want that on like a late night set and things like that. So to me, it was just also I wanted to work in more places, and most of the time they're going to request that you be clean. Sometimes they request you to be dirty, and I'm not always prepared for that one. But
okay.
but if you're able to do your whole set without swearing, it opens up a lot more job opportunities too.
Oh, okay.
Working a corporate event or a cruise ship, or maybe there's kids. You
Sure.
never know who's going to be there.
Right. And then your dirty set, your blue set is basically just dropping the F-bomb every once in a while.
Yeah. There was like one time I worked a club, and I guess they just by default, one of the shows they called the Nasty Show. And so they promoted it as like Ahmed Bharoocha, the Nasty Show. And I didn't really have anything. I had a couple jokes that were maybe off color, but like not a full hour's worth. So I had to say, like, I'm sorry if you came here for that. Here's one. And then here's some jokes about cats and dogs now, I guess.
It crows. Lots of
yeah, they're like, what happened? We wanted the dirty stuff.
Now, who did you find to sort of be like your inspirations as you were thinking about comedy? Who were the people that you looked up to, or who were the people that really inspired you to sort of do the comedy that you did?
So many, like I could name forever, but I think like one of my earlier memories is my mom. We would watch I Love Lucy together. So just the reruns of that, and it was just so funny. And I think my mom's whole family, like they're Irish, so that was like part of being Irish was being funny, and just being at like any family event was like, okay, who's going to be the person to tell the funny story, or
Sure.
Everyone's always trying to just make each other laugh. And then as for stand-up, I think there was I don't know if it's still there, but there was a little video store on the way to URI from from Narragansett. It was like some just tiny, it might still be there, but I would just go through the comedy albums and just take them all to my little house on the beach. And I think like Chris Rock was a huge influence of mine because he did talk about politics, and I just really liked that ability to make people laugh, but also talk about like what's going on in the world. Dave Chappelle was really big at the time too, and he was huge for me. Pryor, Seinfeld, and like Dangerfield, Mitch Hedberg. I think he came to URI. He was one of the first times I saw a comedian, and it was, that was really cool to watch him come. And he would do some of the jokes from the albums, but he was reading from his book, and I was just like, wow, like you can just. He was making us laugh by just reading a thought. It wasn't even finished yet. He was like, that was so great.
Right. And opened up the idea of what comedy could be,
Yeah.
Because I think part of the new comedy world is I don't want to say finding your niche, but having kind of a different perspective on how comedy is told. I think of people like Tig Notaro, who I find incredibly interesting, like or even you think about Nanette or oh, I'm blanking, sorry, what is her name, who did Nanette, I can't think of it right now, I'm sorry, but but
I can't think either. She was amazing. Everyone has to bring something new or unique to be there, or else why are you there?
Right. And I grew up in a pretty healthy, I guess you want to say, Irish family as well, and I know that is part of that world, that the zingers and the cleverness, but a lot of your comedy also really focuses on the Pakistani side of your family, which tends to be very unintentionally humorous. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. I think I always kind of my mom also took the credit for the humor, and I think it took for me a while to realize that my dad is also very funny, most of the time unintentionally, but also he is always joking around. It's kind of corny and it's a little different than the Irish side, but he was always kind of given like oh, what about this? Or, like, and we were always like, Dad, stop trying to be funny, but I think, he's such a big character, and he's so, I think maybe coming from countries where, danger was a lot like prevalent. So he kind of kept that throughout our whole childhood, was that watch out, like stuff's going to happen. Like there's going to be stampedes or like.
And when did he emigrate to the US?
He emigrated. So he kind of has like a crazy story. He was born in Burma. And then when he was 16, there was a coup, and they were getting rid of all the Indians. And then he moved to Bangladesh, which at the time was East Pakistan. And then about 2 years into there was a civil war, I think, happening. So then he went to Pakistan for 2 more years. And then for college, he came to Santa Barbara, California. And that's where I was born. So that he met my mom there. And so he was, I think, 21 about when he came to America, so that would be probably 72. In the 70s. All his pictures are him in bell bottoms and like sideburns.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And with comedy right now, I mean, certainly there is that narrative, but there is also a huge transition of comedy, that people are known to be comedians, but also have other forms of, I guess you could say, entertainment. I had sort of written down, all of the Southeast Asian actors and comedians that I knew, like
Kumail
and Kumail Nanjiani, sorry, who I think is incredible.
Funny.
Very, very funny. But how does that sort of having to now be an entertainment enterprise change the face of comedy? Is every set really just an audition for a TV show or something?
I guess like moving to LA, it like kind of became that a little bit, which took a little bit of the fun out of it for me. Like I prefer going into a room full of people that I don't know, and just doing what I want to do. But when you're in LA, you are kind of like, who's that guy? Is that guy gonna, or was this person gonna put me on that, or is that an agent or whatever? So there, it did shift this element of like, okay, I'm not just doing jokes. Does feel like an audition constantly.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine like every stand-up set is basically your audition for another 85 other things.
Yeah.
Um,
But it
and
is really exciting that there is all of those South Asian comedians out there. And I think it's kind of happened, recently for me. There wasn't a lot of comedians growing up that I could look to that had that background. So it's really exciting now that there are. And now that there's more and more, you don't have to just be, I'm the South Asian comedian.
right.
So now some people can talk about that. Some people can almost not ignore it, but be something other than that in a way, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
And what is the life like for somebody who is diverse within the comedy world? I mean, for so many years it was an old white dude's business,
Yeah. Yeah.
and um and now it does seem to be pretty diverse and accepting in its diversity, but maybe that's just our perspective, me listening
Yeah. I
Curious
think,
XM.
there's still probably a ways to go. And like for me, I think sometimes it's cool when they want like diversity, but sometimes when they're looking for diversity, they you're supposed to kind of represent that diversity in a way, or
Mm,
you're playing that diversity. So I think it feels like it's kind of moving somewhere beyond that too. We almost have to, like, when you're like the first South Asian comedian, you have to tell everyone what it's like to be South Asian, which is what kind of all comedy is talking about your background and talking about where you're from. But then it's also, you want to also be able to move beyond that. Like for auditioning, like I would come in and it was like they wanted me to be the tech guy, and so there's more parts for you, but there's still kind of, you're still having this label on you. So I think we're in this kind of really exciting transition, but
yeah.
there, it still is like you're still fitting a little box. Like, oh, we need some diversity. Will you be diverse for us? So there's
Right.
still the pressure being put on it, or like I'll go in and my name's Ahmed, but I don't look like what they're maybe looking for. I'm not all the way brown. So it's a lot of times casting directors will kind of look up and be like, oh, okay. you know, we're looking for, like, they want the credit to be diverse, and me,
Yeah.
it's like, you got to kind of wait till the credits to know, oh, he's diverse, that
Right.
guy.
Right. Well, and certainly, since the mid 80s, we saw a huge rise in African American community
Yeah.
and comedy being synonymous when you think about, Eddie Murphy, and then
Yeah.
that starting to build. But even, people like Flip Wilson, which is well beyond everybody's
Yeah.
uh, memory here, but there was a connection there. How do you find that there are holes that still aren't explored? I did mention Tig Notaro, and she is always speaking about the LGBT community, and but do you find that there are still places where that could diversify even more?
Yeah, I think so. And I kind of, I think it'll probably always be expanding, and every generation is probably going to face a new, because I think the way that the industry works is it does need you to fit in a little box. So maybe now there's more boxes, but those boxes won't always represent everyone, and you're always going to be looking for a new, unique perspective. So that's exciting, but they're not always exactly ready for that new thing. They're like, wait, we thought you were going to be this little box we need. Like,
Right. And what was the response of the Black Lives Matter movement and the sort of political movements that have happened? Um, they've been happening for a while, but more recently brought to light. Was there a reverberation within the comedy world? Was there a reverberation? I mean, we certainly see the entertainment
yeah.
world challenges there, but we probably don't know that much as much about.
Yeah, I mean, being in LA, I think it's kind of almost at the forefront of a lot of that. Like one of the cool things was people here seem to make more of an effort to make sure that their lineups are diverse. Not everyone, but it feels like a community-based movement of like, oh, hey, let's try to not just have a lineup of all white dudes, or let's try to switch it up. So that's really cool. I think, and it seems to be kind of spreading throughout other comedy communities. But I think I'm in my bubble in LA where it's like, oh, we fixed it, or like we're working on it.
Sure.
And there's backlashes too, or I think people are like, hey, why don't we have to, there's no room for me now, and I think everyone's always going to kind of push and pull on where we have enough representation, and not like just doing a token like, oh, we gave you a spot, it's over.
Right. Well, in theater, we had a big call to action that basically asked everybody to reevaluate kind of the entirety of how we not only produced, but also sort of organizationally how we looked at it. Did you see similar themes within the comedy community too? Like, the comedy clubs needed to be sort of reevaluated as well, or was it more insular, I guess you could say?
I think it seems to be everywhere. I think learning just kind of, it's hard to change that like perspective of making space for people. I think sometimes when you're doing all these plays and stuff, you might not think like, oh, there isn't a part for this person. And so then maybe there's not a lot of people that are coming to the theater department because they don't maybe see those parts for themselves. So that's kind of a self-fulfilling thing where it's like sometimes I think people in LA, they would be like, oh, well, there's all these dudes at these open mics. There isn't a lot of women, but part of it was because it doesn't feel like a safe place for them in a way. So I think everyone's kind of learning that it's not just like, oh, I'll put a woman or a minority or something on the show and it's fixed. The clubs are learning that, I think, but then the audiences also have to learn that too, because I think sometimes, especially in comedy, like there's always this discussion on like, oh, are women funny? And it's like, it's not fair that like one woman comic kind of represents all women. It's like, well, I don't think she's funny, so women aren't funny. Whereas like there's all these male comedians that you don't think are funny, but you don't draw that conclusion. You're like, that guy's not funny. Men are not funny,
Right. Sure.
So now that there's more and more representation, I think that that's kind of being figured out. I think it still has to be figured out more. But I think for a while, when there's fewer of representation in something, that one person, it's all on their shoulders to represent, like, I'm the first Indian comedian. I better be so good that I prove that Indian comedians can be funny.
Right. Well, and I mean, you think about it, but you don't put it in the forefront. I'm sure that comedy clubs weren't the most generous for women. And I'm sure that there was a lot of navigation that had to happen post, even the Me Too movement that really required people to rethink what that environment was like to allow people to feel safe.
Absolutely. And even like when I came to LA, it's like there's a lot of maybe spaces for comedians of different backgrounds, but then you kind of get promoted as that. And that's a weird thing too, where it's like, we got Latino night. So then all the comedians are Latino, but that doesn't really, what does that mean? The comedians are Latino, but they're not all the same kind of comedian. So then you kind of like, sometimes I would get put on like Arab shows or Indian shows, but I wanted to just do jokes about popcorn or something,
Right.
So it becomes this kind of, they're trying, but they're still putting you over here. It's like, come for Black Night, and all the comedians are Black, but like this Black comedian is nothing like this comedian, so it doesn't, you're not going to be maybe what people are looking for. Like, oh, we thought you were going to do jokes about being a Black guy, which maybe someone is, but maybe someone wants to talk about the grocery store or something,
Right. So the thematic connectivity is really just who you are and not
Yeah,
necessarily what your art is. Or
yeah, because there might be like a comedian who does impressions, or a comedian that, like, there's so many kinds of forms of comedy. I think comedy clubs are still kind of figuring that out. Where like music, it's like it's rock night. Okay, I know what I'm gonna go and listen to, but comedy, it's like you put up comedy in a window. What is that? What kind of comedy? And then
right,
if it's just like Latin comedy, then it's like, okay, so are you gonna do jokes about being Latin, or you're just Latin, or
right, right. Now,
finding what that means?
now, sort of circling back about your family. What do you think? Because I know, a lot of your comedy. I keep bringing up the crows because for some
Yeah,
reason that's indelible in my mind. You have a lot of animal jokes or
yeah,
animal stories. I don't want to call them jokes because they're very clever movements of stories. But talking about your family, especially the Pakistani slash Burmese side of your family, what do you think that opens up for people who aren't from that culture?
yeah,
What's the sort of story that you feel bringing that to the forefront? Because it's obviously with the most respect and the
yeah.
most beautiful it's sort of
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I first started doing comedy, I was hesitant to do it because I didn't want it to seem like I was taking advantage of it or just making fun of my dad. But he's my dad, so I want to talk about him. And I
yeah.
think maybe what it adds is it's almost two opposite things, where it's a unique perspective where it's like, oh, this is this other thing that I come from, but it also is very universal in a way too. So it
Sure.
kind of bridges this gap between, like, oh, here's some odd things about having an immigrant father that's from a whole different place, but also this is such a universal parent thing
Yeah.
where your parents are trying to keep you safe and tell you, keep you on the right track. It's a
Sure.
little different because it's a guy with an accent from another country, but there's, so it's kind of cool. It's showing our similarities with our differences in a way. I
Uh-huh.
think is really fun, and
Um,
finding that. And a lot of people will allow you to get away with a little bit more. Where like I like to be political, but I don't like to be in your face about it.
uh-huh.
And so because I have this background, I can talk about that stuff. And I think people like in the middle of the country give me like a pass on that topic a little bit. Like, oh, my
Mm,
dad was a refugee when he was younger, and I can talk about it without, I think, people tightening up and going, oh, don't talk about this,
sure.
because you have that perspective, and they're more willing to hear it from you than from someone who doesn't come from that background, which is kind of
Ah,
cool.
well,
It's like a
manipulative
back
in a
door
lot
into
of ways.
being political a little bit. You're like, hey, this is where I come from, and I'm now you can't get too mad at me when
Yeah.
I defend
Yeah,
it.
no, that's great. That's fantastic. I grew up with my best friend was Indian and his parents were just the sweetest people. And there's some of the stories that you were telling, especially the one about because I have always loved Indian music, but then you were talking about the
Yeah,
video channel and the
yeah,
column.
yeah,
And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a teaser, so you have to go watch it. Um, but I remember watching movies and being like, why are there all these columns that seem to be defeating everybody
yeah,
every
yeah.
step of the way?
Yeah, I would always watch those at my uncle's house. And like, what is this? Why is every video this same thing?
Oh, that's crazy. Now, so sort of again going back, what do you um when you first of all, what was the turning point in your career where you said, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to do, and this is I'm going, all forward on this? Where was it?
Yeah,
I think that was.
I feel like there was a lot of little ones, like
Uh-huh.
even right after college, it was just like, all I want to do now is stand up comedy and find a way to survive. I lived with my parents for a while and trying to find how to make it work with money. Say, working in restaurants still, working at Bank of America in a call center, saving up, and then moving to LA, I think is probably where it really, I was probably 7 years into stand up at that point, and that's where it kind of clicked. Where it was where there was actual jobs. I think with we're in Rhode Island with stand up. you could work kind of the local scene, but you're not going to make a lot of money. You could kind of maybe figure out how to do the road, but it's still not going to. But in LA, there was like everyone was. It was like you were going to work, and it felt like uh, people took it more seriously. Like, okay, yeah, here's our job. Your job is to get this, and I got like a commercial and like some stand up gigs and stuff like that. And that's really where it felt like, okay, I can buy food with the money I'm making, and pay my rent with just finding enough little gigs here and there. And it just kind of gave me the confidence to, I think, lean in and quit my day jobs. And, I got day jobs again at some point and quit them again. But like just finding like, enough little pillars to feel like I could jump from one to the other.
Right. And with that, when did what was that day job that you quit, that you kind of woke up that morning and said, I'm quitting today because
Yeah.
I'm ready, what was the feeling?
I was working at Sprinkles Cupcakes in the phone room. I would take orders for like all over the country of just gourmet cupcakes. Not a fun job. People are angry about their decorations and things like that. Like, it's my birthday. Where's my cupcakes? And you're like, sorry, I'm so sorry. And I think I had just gotten in a commercial or some kind of gig where I was like, oh, I have a little bit of money coming. I'm just gonna quit, and when that money runs out, something else will have come up, and it kind of worked like that for a while. And I think at one point I started Ubering just to, again, find a little bit of money in between when things were drying up a little bit, and just fill the gaps in. And so, yeah, that Sprinkles job and the Uber job were those two that just kind of helped me like jump into the ocean.
Right. What was kind of your last day job? Was it Sprinkles and Uber, or was it?
Yeah, Sprinkles and Uber. I'd say like Sprinkles, and then I think I lasted for about a year or two, and then Ubered for like on and off for another year, and then that was a while ago. So, and then maybe now I'm on unemployment.
Who isn't?
Yeah.
Now, what was your network like out in Los Angeles? I mean, I know that we have a number of students who came from URI right around that same time who were very forward and wanting to be in comedy. Jackie Marfuji and Keith Hansen and a couple other people. Did you have networking through URI or just through the comedy scene that really?
I think a lot through comedy. There was a few different URI people I connected with out here, which is just anyone really. When you first move to a big city, it's like if you know another person, it's a big deal. You're like, oh, here, thank you, you're here. My sister lived here, and she let me live on her couch or not even a couch, a floor next to the couch. I could see the couch. But I live
adjacent.
Yeah, I counted couch adjacent. Dining room floor. And so she really helped me kind of I think like when I'm thinking about it as a career, for me it was just like living so economically, just like floor fine with me, whatever it takes, I'll figure out a way to make a little bit of money and spend less money.
Right.
Finding that balance. And so my sister was there, and I had been doing comedy festivals and just little circuits all over different comedy scenes in different cities. So I knew a lot of people through that, and that really helped. And then just learning, meeting a lot of people through open mics. That was really, I just kind of made myself go out every night. And so I think that was also another thing, is just kind of whatever you want to do, comedy or theater, it's just like making connections and meeting people, and not forcing the networking. I think sometimes people are like, I got a network, what's your name? But I think just being out and like meeting people and connecting with people that you have a connection with, not forcing that connection. Well, and even the people you did know, not leaning on them too much, like, hey, I'm here, can you help me? Just
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never liked the term networking because I always felt like it was so self what's a good word? So self-motivated instead of
Yeah.
wanting to move forward. But I think you said something really incredible is you need to be in rooms, you need to be going to comedy clubs, you need to be seeing other people, you need to be practicing, but you're going to these opportunities not necessarily to
Gain something.
yeah, but just to
Yeah, and I think it's an art a little bit where it's like, they say, oh, you got to network, and like you said, actually thinking that, I think, can put everyone off and not even, you're not looking for someone to give you something. I think
yeah,
you just got to put yourself out there and meet people that you just naturally gel with. And it's not that because they're going to get you a job, it's just now someone that you have like a connection with
sure.
and you feel supported with, and you can go out together and you can create together and you can just hold each other up or motivate each other. And so I think it's really hard I think for some people who are like, I'm supposed to go out and network, I think sometimes it's because there's this pressure of coming away with something like, oh, I got this person's number, or that person can get me a job, where it's just, no, just get out there and meet people and find friends that become a support system, not supporting you financially or
Right.
finding you jobs, but just morally. I think, like, because it's a lonely place sometimes, everyone's kind of cutthroat, everyone's trying to survive. So finding those people that make you feel safe and make you feel comfortable,
Yeah,
those are what I think are really important to find in your network, not necessarily like, oh, that person's a casting agent, or this
right.
person has a show and I can get on their show. It's just, I like that person and they are creative too. And we both want to create and we both want to be here.
Right. And if the networking overtakes the art, like if you're just being active in the pursuit instead
Yeah.
of developing and creating, then I mean, for me at least, it's like, well, then you don't have anything to give. Once you get
Yeah.
that opportunity, what do you then have to give? Nothing, because you haven't worked on it.
Yeah. And you
Um,
can really feel, I think, when people are trying to network, you can just feel this, like, especially in LA, it's a place where everyone's trying to network. And, you'll be at like a party or something, or just at a comedy club, and, someone's talking to you, but they're kind of looking,
oh,
okay, yeah, cool. What do you do? Just
yeah.
that, I think, it's hard. It's a balance, I think, it's like, for your profession, you got to get out there, you got to know people, but don't expect this like receipt back. Like,
Right. Yeah, Tony always calls it the smell of desperation. Like you walk
yeah,
into the room and you can just smell this oh, the ickiness of it all.
yeah,
Um Now, again, for those of you who don't fully know, Ahmed has had so many, those benchmarks for a comedian that one would say, "Oh, you made it, you made it, you made it, you made it." You have your album, you have been on Conan O'Brien, you've been on Late Night with Stephen Colbert, you have a TV series on now, which we're going to talk about because I watched that thing and it's cuckoo nuts.
yeah,
I mean, I know I'm not the demographic. It starts at
yeah,
12:30 at night,
yeah,
but really charming. We have to talk about your hair at one point. But you're looking at these things, these what everybody would say are the moments. But I'm sure even, you could say to yourself, yeah, I've made it. I've made it. But what was the first time that you allowed yourself to be like, hey, I made it. I made it. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I think, like, part of it to me is defining what that means, and I
yeah.
think, it means something so different to each person.
Hmm.
Because I think when you're like a young like person in theater, or you just kind of have this vague sense of like, oh, like either it's fame or it's like a credit, or like, oh, I was on this show, or and really I think it's, for me eventually it was just being able to do my art without feeling like I was gonna die, like not eat
Right.
or need to get a job. So I think maybe like that Conan could have been that first point where it was like, oh, now even if I don't get anything further, when I'm an old man, I can be like, I was on Conan, I did that thing, But I think also even before that, there was a comedy club owner in Boston that really kind of put it in perspective to me. It's like finding what you want is so important, because I think we're all kind of just trying to get ahead sometimes and get that next job, or seeing what other people are getting, like, oh, they got that part, or they got that gig, and taking that out of it, just saying like, oh, what do I want out of this? And I think that's really when I felt like I made it, was when I was on my path to get the things that I wanted, whether it was just enough money to pay my rent, a little TV credit to say like, look, it wasn't all worth nothing or something. I think especially in LA, where there is so much success and so many people, like people I know on billboards and their faces are here, it's easy to kind of feel like, you get that Conan, but you get $800 from it, and then you're that's not going to pay your rent.
No, no, but it's still, I mean, I don't want to say that all my life I've sort of, kind of, when you were talking about your mom getting upset about swearing, but I think about, these are opportunities that my parents would be proud of. Like, they see my face on
Yeah.
this thing, and I'm like, that to me is important.
Yeah.
And I know it's not the same for everybody, but I know in comedy, I'm sure in comedy, that there is this like, I have to do this next thing, and I have to do this next thing, and the only way I can be successful within the community is if I'm doing this stuff,
Yeah. And I think, those things can, they feel really great in the moment, but they'll fade, I think. Like even, doing a Conan or a Colbert, like they feel great, but then a certain amount of time later, you're like, well, now what? What else? And for me, like when I was going to school at URI, one summer I moved to New York and worked at the Comedy Cellar, which is like the best comedy club in the country. And Dave Attell was there a lot, and he seemed pretty sad, and he seemed kind of down. And it kind of early on made it clear for me that there wasn't a certain benchmark that was going to make you feel like you did it. Because I would see him, and he seemed sad, but he had everything I could ever imagine wanting. So kind of early on realizing, at least for any artist, that just being able to do it at any level, that is making it. I think that is everyone's level. You don't want to lose your drive and not try hard to get to the next thing, but you also need to find, while you like the theater department, that to me is some of the most fun I've ever had. So that's making it, like, oh, I was with friends and we saw shows and we were in shows and we put on makeup and we got costumes, and that is, there's nothing ever going to be better than that.
Yeah.
So like being able to enjoy those moments, to me, is what making it is.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like, it's cool that I'm on a TV show, but that's going to end at some point. Yeah. And I'll need money. But doing it, just being in the middle of it and soaking that in, that's truly making it to me.
Right. Well, and the thing about TV, and even with Colbert and with Conan, they're forever. We're so in theater, and probably through comedy and through sets, those things are ephemeral. You put so much work into them, and you get there and you're nervous, and then it's over and it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
And now you're forever there. And certainly with the TV, you get the residual checks every once in a while.
Yeah.
Those commercials. So, you can buy your own sprinkles cupcakes.
Sometimes they're pretty expensive.
Well, now it's that Hollywood money. So one of our students who is on, Connor Delaney, wants to be a stand-up comedian. And awesome. And he's does improv and such, but he asked a question as far as sitting down to write jokes versus documenting things that you find obscure and then returning to them. What do you find to be your process of like taking your style, what your marketing Ahmed style is, but also fitting in the things that you find funny or the jokes? How do you, I think like the
Sure.
transitions or how do you navigate those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a constant struggle for I think most comedians. I'm always trying to, go back to how I used to do it. Like, oh, I remember when I was at URI, I had a notebook all the time and I always wrote it down. And then now it's my phone and it
Right.
just doesn't feel the same. But it's always changing for me. Sometimes, at least always having that notepad or having that phone. And anytime there's a thought, putting it down, because if you don't, it's going to go away.
Sure.
And being disciplined and sitting down and trying to expand upon those ideas. But also writing on stage is something I do a lot, and kind of chasing the crowd laughing at something. You're like, oh, getting up and doing it. Just kind of always be writing whatever version of it is. And never, I think learning as I get older is being less picky about what I write. I think that kind of can stop the flow of writing. Like you were saying, like what's my brand? I guess like I try not to think too much about that on the early stages of the ideas.
Uh-huh.
Just any idea is an idea. It doesn't have to be the most original one in the beginning. You can fine tune it later. You can throw it out, but put it down on the paper and
Gotcha.
try it out. And if you thought it was funny at one point, it probably is. And even if you're telling it on stage and it's not working, you might just need to tweak it or figure it out. So I really enjoy um, the process of finding where that joke is going to be, and then
Right.
it will eventually, hopefully, become into your voice. But I wouldn't worry too much about, especially early on, like does this fit my voice? Um, it's something good to clock and think about, but don't edit yourself too much, especially in the beginning. Let those seedlings grow and edit later. Edit when it's, your special or your big show, but open
Right.
mic and just do everything and write it all down and try it all.
And with that process, because I don't know much about like the daily life of a comedian, but do you put aside time every single day that you're sitting down and writing?
I
Um,
don't. I should when I'm being like mentally healthy. I do, but like I
okay.
procrastinate. Like in the beginning of the year, I was like, oh, New Year's resolution. I'm gonna go to the library like once or twice a week and just look through all my notes, compile them, expand upon them. Uh, so I think when I'm at my most motivated, I do, and that's always great. And I think to take the pressure off in those settings, because I think sometimes as a stand-up, you can sit there and force yourself, and it's never right. You're like, I'm writing, but nothing's funny. Just doing it and being not judging yourself too much in those moments. Like
Sure.
sit down, write, do it. It doesn't have to. You don't have to like stand up at the end of it and be like, I wrote my bit, But having that discipline in is good. I think even when you write out a bad joke, it now makes room for the next good joke. Because
Right.
sometimes I think comedians can be so judgmental of their own thoughts, like, oh, that's not original. Put it down on the paper. You don't have to even tell it on stage, but get it out so that the next thought can come forward.
Well, and your style tends to be very narrative. Like it isn't, the first thing when you were talking, I don't know if you've ever seen the Joan Rivers documentary.
Oh no, I haven't, but I love Joan Rivers.
It's so good. But what she has is a card catalog that she is basically, because she did jokes. I mean, she
Yeah.
was literally like, here's the quick story, here's the punchline. But
Mm.
she had all these cards. So if she had one on, I don't know, her dog, it would go in the dog category, and she would go and make a set by pulling all these jokes and stacking them up. And she would write them down and type them out and everything. But because yours are narrative, do you kind of have to compose it like over and over again and like rewrite it, or you just
Yeah, I guess
doing it?
I do rewrite a lot in the sense on stage, I guess. I'm not always physically changing the whatever I wrote down originally,
Sure.
but I like to have at least, a nugget of a joke, and maybe in the beginning I would sit out and write the whole thing out, but now for the most part, I'll have a little nugget, go up on stage, have a few lines that I knew I was going to say, and then kind of see where it takes me, and then just do that a lot of times. Like, take that joke and say it, especially in LA where you can do like 3 or 4 open mics a night. Do that joke. By the end of the night, you'll have so much more. And then now, like, listen back, shave it, cut this out, add that, add the narrative part. Or, I don't think too much about that stuff when I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just like when I'm at my most like being prolific, it's just like write. Don't judge it, write it all out. The funny stuff will float to the top.
Yeah. And we tend to think of a comedian being kind of an individual too, like just sitting at home. I mean, are you having like group sessions with your other comedian
sometimes
friends?
Absolutely. And actually for me, that helps with any kind of writer's block, is just listening to another comic and trying to help them with their joke. It kind of breaks your own psyche up. Like sometimes you're like, oh, what's funny? What? And you're trying to think, but when someone else is like, oh, I have this idea, it's easier for you to kind of go, oh, what could we do with that idea? Okay, cool. I love writing with other people. And, it doesn't always work. Like they might try to give you tags that don't sound like you, or,
yeah,
and that's okay. Just kind of being there, talking stuff out with other comics. That's great. Like I was just working on a cruise ship, and I met this comedian, Kenny, from Cleveland, and every day we just made each other say some new ideas, and it really was great. Just having another person there that you have to go like, spoons, and they're like, okay, yeah, what about forks, and you're like, okay, yeah, forks too.
What about sporks?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, really, sporks.
Yeah.
Sporks.
Yeah, I love writing sessions, and I think you have to be open, because it can be awkward, because some comedians want to tell you a bunch of different things you should say, and you don't usually want to take any of them. Even if, like, even my comedian friends that I think are some of the funniest people, I don't usually like their suggestions, but it's okay. It doesn't mean that you have to take them all. It's just having that discourse helps the juices flow.
Yeah. What is your favorite beverage when you're working on that? Like, what's the thing that helps you?
I guess marijuana can help a little bit. It's not a beverage, but
I said beverage, Ahmed.
Coffee.
It's legal.
Actually,
it's California. It's legal.
Yeah, California legal. Yeah. It's actually, I never even smoked pot before it was legal. It was kind of a square, and then it was legal, and I tried it, and it helped me out.
So speaking of marijuana and legal, and as we're in our kind of last minute here, let's talk about Dreamcore.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's how they pronounce it, Dream Corpse.
That's a good segue from marijuana.
Yeah, exactly. For all of you, check it out. It is such an interesting and strange, beautiful, again, from an aesthetic point of view, so exciting, so beautiful. But I have to talk about your season 3 hair. Was it season 3?
Season 2, they started the hair.
It's kind of like Klingon from Star Trek.
There was some influence of that, I think, when we were coming up with it.
With Wrath of Khan or something. I don't know. But
yeah.
It's
so cool.
Is any of that real?
The poof up here is real, and they shave in my sides, and then they add the dreads. Part of it was because me and one of the other actors, Nick Rutherford, we kind of had first season similar hairdos.
Right.
And they were like, a lot of people think you're the same character, I think. And I was like, talking to the director, I'm like, I just want to grow my hair out like a big fro, because that's always kind of the hair I had. And he was like, yes. And then went like, he was like, yeah, your hair should be out. And then it was great for me, because it really helped me find a character. I think early on I was just like, who am I? Because I had a pretty small part. But just those little additions for me, I love becoming someone else, and like, oh yeah, I'm this cool guy. I'm not a huge drug head, but in the show, I am like, I don't even, probably not what you call it, but, you know, it just kind of helped define this other person than I am, you know, and it kind of helped me feel cooler and feel like I'm a cool guy in this show.
Right. You are a cool guy. I think, and I could be wrong because I haven't been able to watch the whole thing, but the first season you didn't have a name, and then
I had a
all
name.
of a sudden they started calling you Ahmed.
No, well, actually, when they cast it, my name was David, and then when we filmed the pilot, they were just like, I don't know, they were just like, let's just keep your name Ahmed. We just want you to be Ahmed. So I think, but in the first season, now, you know, pretty small role, and then second season it just kind of grew a little bit more, and then third season I get to do a lot more, which is fun. And I mean, that's been a really amazing like learning experience for me. Like I was so nervous in the beginning. They were like, "Oh, you're the improv guy," because I had met the director on a commercial and I improv'd a couple things, and they were like, "Wow, that was cool." And so they brought me in. They didn't really give me a lot of lines in the first season, but they were like, "You're going to improv a lot of stuff." But you know, it's so different than stand up or improv or theater because everyone's filming and they need to know what you're going to say or that you're going to say anything. So there's not always a lot of room to just go like, "Oh, well, what about this?" You know?
Right.
And I really had to learn when to improv and like saving the improv a lot, I think was what I learned.
Yeah.
Like the first few takes, most of the time the camera was going to be fuzzy. And so if you improv'd in the middle of a weird camera motion, no one even saw it. And they were like, "Stop doing whatever you're doing. We're trying to do this." Right. So I would kind of now, second season, wait till they had everything in. Good take was taken. And then maybe that next take, I'll be like, "What about this?" And they're like, "Oh, cool." So just kind of finding those places where on set there was room to, and even knowing the cameramen, letting them know who I was. And they'd click over to me sometimes when they knew I would maybe do something.
And I'm assuming you've met Stephen Merchant. Am I correct?
Yeah, he doesn't usually come to set because he's just the voice of the robot. Right. But he comes every once in a while, and he's so nice and so funny.
The tallest person in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, he's like very tall, very skinny. Yeah,
he's like 6'8". I mean,
he's always like ducking in to get into it. Like, it's like all I know him of is just.
Hello. And is there talk of a new season of it? Because I know you just started your fifth season.
Third season, that's airing right now. It's never really that clear until we know for sure. Like usually we find out while it's airing, but because of COVID and everything, I'm not sure. I'd hope so, and I think the network's really happy with the show, which is cool. Yeah. But the cool part about Adult Swim is that they're so hands off, but that also kind of sucks, you know. Yeah. They're like, "Whatever, we'll do it," and you're like, "But can you tell us today?" You know, they're like, "You're fine, we'll do it eventually," because each season has been over years apart. You know, it's been like 3 seasons have been like 6 years of my life in a way.
Right. Well, there was like a little bit of a pause, like 2 years of a pause in between, and then it's started to pick up.
Well, the animation takes forever, so when we film it, by the time it comes out, it's like over a year later. When it like I filmed this, I don't even remember when this 2 years ago. I think almost by this point.
And we do have to wrap up soon, but sort of tying into that, what are the challenges with comedy in this pandemic age? I mean,
a lot.
Everything you have mentioned has really been, you know, being in those comedy clubs and being active, and though they're doing some filming, I'm sure it's more difficult. But do digital forms offer any opportunity that you didn't see before, or has it become just the norm?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably haven't been as active as I should be. I'm kind of went into dad mode during the pandemic. But
everybody, Ahmed has a 4-year-old son, Walter. 3-year-old, cute as a biscuit, just the most adorable thing. If you follow him on Facebook, there are all sorts of great Walter stories.
Yeah, he's really been keeping me sane during all this.
Sure.
But I think, you know, with Zoom, it is so hard for stand up because stand up is so much, in theater too, is so much about like feeling the people in the room and kind of like thriving off of that. So that's been a challenge, but it's also been a great lesson, I think, in being okay with those silences, like just knowing that, hey, someone's gotta, maybe someone's laughing, maybe they're not, I gotta keep going no matter what, you know.
Sure.
So that's been a great like exercise in comedy for me. But I think it's also a good lesson in just adapting. A lot of my comedy friends, they'll put out a video instead, they'll just, you know, just moving with whatever you got, I think has been a great lesson for this
Right.
time.
So you're gonna start putting out videos, do a web series?
Yeah, yeah, I should.
Why
I have a
not?
camera, and I mean, even just putting up stuff like this, like so much of the stand-up shows for me, like when I watch them, it's like it doesn't have what I like about stand-up is like the performance element, you
Yeah.
know. So when I'll do stand-up here, I'll push the camera back and run around and come pop out of the curtain, just try to keep the energy up, you know, because it's hard to capture that energy here, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And we find that too. I mean, even just as a professor and having to Zoom lectures every once in a while, I had to film one and I was just yelling into the void in my basement at like
Yeah, that's
12:30
all
in
my.
the morning, talking about, keton or something like that. I don't even remember what it was, but you're just it's dead, you just feel it. And for
Yeah,
some people it's there and they love it, and we have to adapt, I guess.
yeah, exactly. I think adapting is a great thing to just have even without the pandemic, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it's making people really forced to try new
Yeah,
things
get creative.
and get creative and have things in their back pocket, because these are skills that will go into the post-pandemic world.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Ahmed, thank you so much. This has been a treat. I feel um I don't know. I just feel so excited to see you, and I
Oh,
did
me too. I'm so happy to be here.
and we really appreciate it. Carol Peg said that you bring her so much joy ever since the
Oh,
napkin moments during Unbound.
oh,
Are you in
you bring
Unbound,
me joy
Carol?
too. I don't think I was in it. I think was that, what did I do in that? I think I might have just been watching it. I think.
Oh, okay. Oh goodness. But thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you guys.
appreciate having here,
Yeah,
and thank you for taking time out of your schedule. This is really great.
of course.
And we'll put this up so that you can, I don't know, add it to your resume, because this is like
Yeah,
they see it like Conan leading to Colbert and then the URI interview.
yeah, yeah.
Right? Like,
This will give me another, just boost in my career.
awesome.
This will get the fourth season of Dream Corp.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe all online.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ahmed. Everybody,
Thank
thank you so much for coming, and enjoy your evening, and you have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon. And if you want to hang out for 2 seconds, Ahmed, we'll go from there. Oh,
Sure.
it was napkin moment and Pride of Prejudice. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.